And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Friendly Ex-Muslim. I'm your host, Abdullah Samir. Today, I'm joined by someone who is a closeted ex-Muslim, and he goes by the name Aladdin, not his real name, of course, but we're going to talk about that. So this is now episode 81 of the podcast. So if you're listening on YouTube, then you're probably connected to me already. But if you want to check out an easier way to listen to the podcast, feel free to listen to it on Stitcher, iTunes, whatever. It's there as well. And especially for the longer form podcasts, it's actually much easier to listen on those platforms. And just as an experiment, I'm also um, streaming on TikTok. So there's not a proper there's not a proper way for me to push the stream to both platforms. So what I'm doing is I'm using I'm using my phone to record it, and hopefully it goes just fine. Those of you on TikTok, this is an experiment, and I let me know if the sound quality is. Hopefully the sound quality is okay, and all that. So now that all of that is aside, oh, one more last thing as well. This is a new channel, Friendly Ex-Muslim. As you know, my main channel is demonetized, so I have this channel now. And all new uploads, everything is going to be coming here. So please do subscribe if you're new here. Okay, now it's all out of the way. All right, Aladdin, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Good, good, good. So let's talk about your name, Aladdin. What's up with that?
So in Arabic, that is two words, ala and din. Din means religion, as we all know. And ala means raising or like raising the status of. So ala din means, raising the someone who raises the status of the din, which is a little bit ironic because of what I'm here to talk about today.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like the opposite of Aladdin. You're like lowering the Dean, right?
I'll
So,
let people come to their own conclusions, but yes, I'm here to share my story.
so let's go back into your background. Whatever you feel comfortable with sharing, can you tell us, share whatever you can, like about your background, your upbringing?
Sure. So I'm a native Arabic speaker. I grew up in the Middle East, specifically around Saudi Arabia. Um, I know that Saudi Arabia makes people a little nervous, but I was not raised Wahhabi or Salafi. I was raised Sunni in a very moderate, very educated family. Um, and I had a mostly, happy upbringing, no issues there. I was a very enthusiastic little kid about Islam, and I was a goody two shoes, so I didn't have too much to worry about. Um, but yeah, and that's how I started to have doubts at some point, even though I was very devout. I had Quran classes every week. I was very enthusiastic about the topic, but eventually I started to have questions, big picture questions, not really specifics, and I started to ask them to someone I trusted, which is my mom, um, and then the answers were pretty vague or not really convincing, but I sort of pushed it aside for a bit. So that was the beginning of my journey out of Islam, but it wasn't a 1 year, 2 year process. It's been almost a decade since. Um,
Wow,
yeah.
was this in Saudi?
Yes, that was as I was growing up as a teenager.
In
Um,
Saudi, how did that? So you access to information is restricted in Saudi. I remember even as a Muslim, even some Islamic websites like Islam QA are blocked by the government. Anything that's not officially approved. How did you? What caused you to have doubts? It wasn't obviously it wasn't ex-Muslim content. It was something else.
oh, not at all. I didn't even have the slightest clue about what ex-Muslim meant or that label till very recently. And it wasn't even being exposed to outside information. Funny enough, you're right about the censorship, but I can't attest to it when it comes to religious websites because I hadn't really been looking that deep into that. Um, but basically, what started it was the idea of qada and qadar. That God had written everything in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, and everything's predetermined and nothing happens without God's permission. So I had questions about, well, how does that work with free will and predestination, free will, and all that. And similarly, it tied into the story of Al-Khidr when he killed that child because God said the child was going to grow up to be problematic. So it was all very unclear to me how two contradicting things can, happen at the same time. So that was the beginning of it. It wasn't really about, like I said, specifics about Islam or hearing opposing opinions or anything like that.
Interesting, interesting. And unfortunately, by the way, just as an aside, the TikTok stream was terminated. Someone reported it for copyright infringement. I
That was
guess
pretty quick.
it was on for all of 5 minutes and it's already off again. So I guess that was an experiment that didn't work out. But sorry about the distraction. So back to your topic at hand. So
Sure.
you were saying somehow without even finding out ex-Muslim content, the qada and qadr, which is basically the free will and the destiny, that was causing a problem for you. Can you elaborate on that a bit? What was it about the free will and qadr that was causing an issue?
Sure. So let me reiterate how or explain how I learned that information. Because I had like weekly Quran classes and I understood Arabic. So a lot of the Quran, or not a lot, parts of it are just in clear Arabic that you can understand. So I understood some things, and then whatever I didn't understand, I would ask the Sheikh, and he would explain to me what that was about or what that word meant, and so on. So I was pretty familiar with these topics, even though I wasn't, a scholar of any sort, or I didn't even study in an academic way, except for a religion class. So it was very organic that I thought of this, which is, if God has predetermined everything, or some people don't like that word, if God knows everything that will ever happen before we were born, what is the point of the test? And then the answer to that was, for God to demonstrate to you that you made these choices yourself. And then that made the whole thing again still pretty murky. Like, then how come can I surprise God? If God knew I was going to go to hell, like, am I going to change my ways and then that would change God's will for what was going to happen? Similar thing with dua, like if I make dua, am I changing God's plan? And that was my problem with free will. And then once that became unclear, I started thinking about all the people who didn't choose to be born not Muslim, and that whole topic, opened up a can of worms, as they say. And yeah, and it seemed like it was a game of chance where you're either lucky to be born Muslim or you're not, and it makes you a lot more predisposed to be Muslim. Obviously, I was told, well, you can still convert, or there are people who convert, and so on, but it's pretty clear, what the chances are. Um, and it was just sad to me that people recognized that it was a game of chance and still saw no issue with it. And it was confusing to me at first. And yeah, that was the beginning of my doubts.
So by game of chance, what you mean is that someone that is born in a Muslim family is 80 times more likely to remain Muslim in, say, Saudi Arabia, even though that wasn't you, by the way, but in general. And like someone, let's say an Indian boy born in a Hindu family in Uttar Pradesh or whatever, is going to be Hindu, like almost 100% chance. And yes, there is a little bit of malleability there, where some Christians convert to Islam and some Hindus, very few Hindus convert to Islam, very few Buddhists convert to Islam, but a lot of Christians convert to Islam. So there is some change happening over there. But overall, it's pretty much like an unfair playing field. Like you're basically screwed if Islam is true and you're born into a Hindu family in a small village. And the reason I'm saying small village is because obviously if you're in a big town, you might know about Islam. But even if it was in a big city, you know Islam, but like chances are you're not going to convert because it won't make sense to you. Your family upbringing, your childhood, everything around you will tell you that no, Hinduism is true. Or if you're a Christian, most likely you say Jesus is God, and Islam doesn't make sense to you because Muhammad, no, I don't like Muhammad, right? He did a lot of bad things. So unless you're actually born into that religion, chances are you will not actually convert to it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I also started thinking of it from this angle of, like if you have a neighbor who's Christian, right, and you're a nice Muslim, and you introduce them to Islam the right way, not through watching the news about this country or that, um, even then they're just going to see you as a good person, but it's not enough of a reason for them to think everything they were taught is false. Just as we see it, if you have a nice Christian neighbor who introduces you to Jesus, you're not going to accept the Holy Trinity. Um,
Yeah.
and to compound on that was like that I understood very well what hell meant, because I was reading these verses in Arabic, right? And there are some words here and there that I didn't understand, but my sheikh was very helpful in explaining what the shagarat zakum means, like that horrible tree, and things like that. So I was like internally struggling to think of these people go into that hell that I know very well. So
But
that was
but
one of the things. Yeah.
but in Saudi Arabia, everyone around you was Muslim.
Yes, obviously there were, especially when you go to more like upper class communities that I was in contact with, there are a lot more Muslims who are just cultural Muslims, but at the end of the day, they're still Muslims and they don't really question or care to question a lot of the things in Islam. So yeah, I was exposed to maybe one atheist, and I thought he was the most obnoxious, like, internet atheist ever. I always took the defensive position, even though like he didn't really conversations with him didn't really make me think that hard. But yeah, so being exposed to an atheist didn't at all help me like have doubts in that way.
But
If
like when
anything,
you said
yeah.
you were worried about people going to hell, or
Yeah.
like you felt it was unfair, which people were you talking about?
Um, I was primarily thinking of all the people who, like we said, through the game of chance, they're not Muslim. But my
Mhm.
thoughts on like kuffar, non-believers, was still like I didn't really think about them too hard. I just thought, okay, well, they knew the rules and they chose this, which is a very
Oh,
flawed way to think about it. But um, yeah,
that's
again, I
amazing.
was like 16 or something, so not all of this went through my head at the time, but just the doubts at first, I did put them aside too, because I wanted to be a good Muslim, and yeah, so yeah, that's all.
Wow. So I'm impressed because not only were you in a society that was all Muslims, you still managed to have empathy for others that you didn't like. You didn't. I guess you didn't know a lot of non-Muslims other than that one atheist you said.
Yeah, that there was maybe like one Christian guy in every classroom or something, but I wasn't really exposed to non-Muslims aside from movies and media, and even then, not really like atheists and Christians and so on. Um, so yeah.
Wow. I mean, that is impressive. I mean, at 16 years old, you were able to see the problems with the idea of hell, the problem with destiny. It's impressive. I mean, 16, I converted to Islam when I was in my like around the same age, I guess 18 or so. I went the opposite direction in Canada, in a non-Muslim country, which is kind of funny.
Well, I don't want to take credit for that. I just think it comes from, I don't know, being extra aware of all the details. Because most Muslims, it's not that they're not ethical or bad people who are selfish. They just really haven't thought about it past, going to Friday prayer and then that's it. So being someone who is exposed to it, that's why.
So you had, like you said, when you were talking to your sheikh in Saudi Arabia, this was like an imam at the masjid or something, or is it like a family relationship you had with the sheikh, and you would ask him questions about the Quran? Like what was that? What was going on there?
So at that point, like 16, 17, I wasn't anymore taking those Quran classes, so I couldn't ask him directly. Um, but basically, my Quran classes were at home once a week. The sheikh would come in. Um, can't remember if he was an imam or not, but he was certainly like very knowledgeable and a sheikh, and he even like wore the traditional, Saudi clothing. He wasn't Saudi though. Um, so he wasn't like feeding me any extremist thoughts or anything. He was just simply teaching me how to like the tilawa of the Quran. That was most of the point of it. Um, and I got good at it, and I was very proud of reading Quran in front of the whole class or in front of the school in the morning and that kind of thing. Ever since I was a kid. So yeah, that's how I learned through that and through like bedtime stories that my family used to read to me about the seerah and the prophets and so on. So yeah.
There's a meme that's going around on different platforms where Muslims will ask,
Oh God,
like,
I know that one.
ex-Muslims, like how many zakats in wudu, or something like how many zakats in Surah Fatiha, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there was a post that went viral recently about someone asking about Paulo, like some kind of food or
Palau.
something. Yeah, palau. Yeah. Um, these things honestly sadden me more than like they used to be funny, but they just
Yeah.
discredit ex-Muslims. Um, like you can't even verify that the person who said that was an actual ex-Muslim, right? It just could have been a Muslim trolling or just some
Yeah,
person.
yeah, that's true. I
Yeah.
mean, what I think about that, just as a side note, that obviously not everyone was a very religious Muslim, and some Muslims never even prayed like once in their whole life, and they left Islam.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that they're wrong about Islam being false. And let's just use an analogy. There might be someone born as a Christian who never really cared about Christianity. He's like, his parents took him to church sometimes, and he doesn't know the rituals, or he was never baptized, and he doesn't know like the different things he has to recite or anything. And then he becomes Muslim, and then someone asked him like, "Oh, what were you?" He's like, "I was Christian." And they asked him a question about Christianity, and he's like, "I don't know what Jesus said. What did Matthew? Maybe some famous. We have a religious markers, all of us. We have these things that are kind of common, like how many rakats in the prayer, whatever, like that. And they do as well in Christianity. And of course, there could be like a common question that every single Christian in the world knows, but he might not know it because he wasn't really into that. Like he wasn't ever religious. Does that mean that Christianity is true necessarily? No, it doesn't, right? So that's one part of it. Some of them are legitimate ex-Muslims. There are some Christians I've noticed that pretend to be ex-Muslim, and maybe some Hindus, far right Hindus. I don't know who all these people are, but I've run into some of these people. One was a Sikh lady that was pretending to be an ex-Muslim, and I'm like, when I was interacting with her, this was many years ago on Facebook, it's just the story wasn't adding up. There's some things about the story that was like, this is not making sense, right? And then eventually I realized that this is a fake ex-Muslim. And of course,
Mhm.
like you said, it's so dumb because it discredits like the real ex-Muslims, right?
Oh,
When
and
people
thank you for clarifying that, by the way. I didn't at all mean to say that those uninformed about Islam can't leave or, aren't valid as ex-Muslim voices, But yeah, what I meant to say is the instigators, like the person you mentioned, who try to bring down Islam. I don't know why, either just to troll or just because they want their religion to look better in comparison. And I try to shut that down personally whenever I see it. Like Muslims think that we're okay with that, but we're absolutely not, because it's hurting us too. Um, so yeah, and that's also why some criticizers of Islam who happen to follow a different religion, I don't know if I can give those people as much credibility when I see them pointing out all the bad in Islam and ignoring the bad in theirs. So that's a bit of a tangent, but anyway.
do you I'm not gonna put you on the spot. But how much Quran did you memorize?
Um, I made it to about halfway. I started from the smaller surahs onwards, which is the opposite of what everybody does. I think, or usually people go from Al-Baqarah onwards, or Al-Fatiha and then Al-Baqarah. And a lot of this I forgot, or I started to like not memorize as often as I started high school, because I had my education to worry about, and I had a huge course load. But to this day, I don't remember, like I can't recite all the surahs, but every now and then I can recite several verses in a row, or if someone mentions it, I know what verse they're talking about. Um, so it's still ingrained in my head because of how young I was when I learned it.
Mhm. Do you feel like reading any Quran for us today?
Reading any Quran, what?
For us today, I was saying. Do you feel
That's putting me on the spot. But sure, like throw me an ayah and I'll.
Surah Mulk? Do you know Surah Mulk?
So what? Al
Surah
Mulk?
Mulk. Tabarakalladhi
Yeah,
yadihil.
yeah. Not by heart right now, but
Surah
I.
Doha? I don't know. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I haven't
Pick one.
memorized
Pick your
it.
favorite. What's your favorite? What was your favorite one to recite? Just
I mean, I think I loved Surah Al-Falaq because it was short and I can, finish my prayer quickly when I was in a rush.
That's a
Um,
follow.
yeah, but I think one that has stuck with me lately is Surah Al-Masad. تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغنى عنكم مالكم وما كسب. I'm not doing tilawa right now, uh, but yeah, so yeah, that one stuck with me because I understood the meaning. Like I thought about the meaning hard lately, and
What's
yeah,
the meaning? Let's talk
well,
about the meaning a little bit.
it's again, I know some people might try to correct me on this, but from my research so far and from my understanding of it in Arabic, um, basically it's a diss against Abu Lahab, right? It's like Abu Lahab and his wife, you're gonna get this and that in hell. And as I understand it, it's because Abu Lahab would pick on the Prophet for seemingly no reason, as the narrative goes. So um, yeah, I just found it very odd. Like at the time, I didn't think about it at all. Like I was reading this stuff and I understood it, and I just just put it aside. But now I'm thinking about it, like why would we have to memorize this verse today, or what good are we getting out of it? And I have asked this question to several sheikhs because I have spoken to several sheikhs, throughout my journey in this. And what they say is it's just to demonstrate that people have what's coming to them. And yeah, answers like these just didn't work for me. But anyway, that's that.
Mhm. Oh yeah. So all right. So so you found your way to Islam. Did you leave Islam in Saudi Arabia, or were you just questioning it?
Oh no, I was just questioning as a teenager, and then I sort of put it aside. Um, Wait, before we move on to the next phase, one thing that I just recalled was even as a child, when I was told stories about from the hadiths about the Prophet, for example, making wudu, and then the water that he made wudu with, his followers use as well, and how much you're supposed to love the Prophet more than your family and all that. I found it weird. Like I asked very respectfully, I asked my mother, like, what, isn't that a little gross? Like the whole water spit thing. And the answers are always like, no, there's an exception because he's holy and so on. Um, like they don't deify him; he's not a god, but he's pretty damn close. So that was one of the things that made me like, it's a small question mark, but it didn't really go further than that at the time.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah. So yeah, after that, I went to university in a different country, all by myself, um, which made me hold on to Islam a little bit more, especially in the beginning, being exposed to new people, um, like being exposed to people like gay people who I, hadn't really met that much before, and I had my preconceived notions about them, and Christians and just non-religious people and atheists and all that. Um, and I was taking this position of open dialogue with my roommates who were, not Muslims. They would ask me questions like very innocently. They're not like gotcha questions or anything. They're like, I'm curious about Islam. What about this and that? And I explain it from what I know, and if I don't know, I look it up. Um, and then some of the questions were a bit uncomfortable for me, um, and I welcomed that. But then as I started looking into them, I just like gave the same answers that I hear today, and I was satisfied with that for a while till in my own head I started questioning myself: is that really like a good answer? Um, so that was one other phase, but I still kept Islam. And then slowly, my faith started withering. I still tried to go to prayer on Friday and like don't miss a prayer every day. But um, these questions are more like the idea of fairness. I thought to myself, my faith is weak. I don't really know what to think of this stuff. I don't think God would send me to eternal hell for this if I miss a few prayers or if I'm not sure about my faith right now. And and that's how I shelved Islam aside for a while. And that's when it got a little complicated when people would ask me, "Oh, are you Muslim?" And at first my answer was yes, and I'm proud. And then I would start to say, well, it's complicated. And that's when I thought to myself, okay, you need to really think about this. When I got to all my answers being it's complicated because yes, I am Muslim, but I believe in some stuff, but not the rest, or I'm not yet decided about the rest. Um, but then again, it came and went in waves. It happened that there were certain events around the world that put Muslims in a bad light. and I went on the internet to defend Islam because, my parents weren't like that. Nobody I knew was like that, and they didn't condone any of that. So again, I was exposed to very um, hateful people who weren't just criticizing Islam. They were going after brown people, basically, right? And I was very defensive about it. But that, again, exposed me to questions that I had never thought of before, and that I thought, like Muslims think today, are just fake, or they're trying to, catch Islam, uh, make it seem bad, and so on. But ironically, defending Islam got me to learn even more about the things that they didn't teach me in Quran class. Yeah.
So I forgot to ask you a follow up on the question earlier about, when you said your sheikh was telling you about the tree of Zakum. Was that your Quran teacher, the Tilawah teacher?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you had a relationship with him until you basically finished or stopped reading the Quran classes, and then you went on to higher education.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's all sounds. I mean, it makes sense. You know what I think? I think that there's certain people that are born skeptical, and some people that tend to be believers. It has to do with dopamine levels, and has to do with the way your brain is wired and stuff like that. And I think you are just a natural skeptic. Would you agree with that? Do you think you're a natural skeptic?
Um, I think so. And I think a lot of it is just down to chance. Like that's just how my brain works. That's how chemicals are in the brain. And there's so many factors, like something as random as, if I had joined a group of friends who were more enthusiastic about Islam earlier, it could have either made me more enthusiastic about Islam or more exposed to the problems. And it's just a game of chance. So I don't really take credit for being a skeptic, but I find myself these days, yeah, like more towards that side of things. Like I don't take any claim, just an unsubstantiated claim, whether it's politics or religion or whatever it is. So yeah, you're right. It does take a certain type of thinking to get there, but um, yeah,
Are you an atheist right now? You describe yourself as an atheist?
it really depends on what that word means. It means different things to different people. Um, if it means that I'm denying the existence of a God, I don't know if I can say that, but I think we shouldn't be forced to take a position on the existence of God. I know someone gave an example of an invisible teapot in the sky. You don't need to have a label if you deny that there's an invisible teapot in the sky. So to me, I'm agnostic in that sense, but I'm atheist from the sense that I don't think God as exists. I don't
That's
think
the
God
certain
exists
book.
as described in any of these religions. Because if,
Yeah.
if he does, if there are consequences, he knows how to reach us. So he doesn't make it such a game of chance. But yeah, that's my philosophy on that.
Yeah, that was Russell's teapot analogy you were talking about. Like, can you disprove the existence of a teapot flying around in space somewhere outside the third moon of Jupiter or something like that? There's some sort of because of course we can't, right? Because theists sometimes come up with this thing about absence of evidence is not evidence of, some expression like that about, well, you can't disprove God exists. Well, we're not even trying to disprove God exists. Our issue
Exactly.
is with the particulars of our religious, like this religion in particular, any religion in general, basically, has these issues. So when you were in university now, another country, and you were engaging with non-Muslims, were asking you questions, and you were finding that little by little, the answers that you were repeating, which were okay-ish in Muslim country, no longer were satisfying. And was it like they were probing and asking follow-up questions, or was it that like when you gave them the answers, you kind of like, even as you said it, you didn't really believe it yourself? Because I've been in a situation like that. Let me just share my story. um, I was Muslim, and I was working with a bunch of atheists, and there was one and wonderful people, and one of these guys, his name is Joe, and Joe actually asked me, because I was a very outspoken Muslim, right? I'm like, yeah, Islam's the best, whatever. Right? And he's like, okay, well, I want to know, like, tell me, why do you think that Islam is true? The Quran is true. I'm like, the Quran has no mistakes in it, right? And he was sitting on a computer. I still remember this, right? And I could see in his mind, he was like about to Google mistakes in the Quran. And I'm thinking in my mind, I hope he doesn't do that. And then so I'm like, oh, but even if you go, I'm like, and I actually told him, I'm like, yeah, but those websites out there on the internet, yeah, that's all. None of that's true. That's all. That's just nonsense. All of those things have answers, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of predicted what he was thinking, and I tried. But as I was saying that, I was thinking in the back of my mind, like, am I really sure about that? Was it like that for you too?
No, not really. And I want to get back to that fake websites thing in a bit. But no, actually, the people who asked me, it was mostly like a couple of roommates and friends, and they were extra respectful and extra accommodating. You know, the whole I don't want to offend you by these questions, and I'm like, no, no, bring it on. Like, not because I like a challenge, but more like, no, I want someone to have an outlet to ask these questions rather than looking up on the internet and finding fake sources or whatever it was. Um, like you can trust that I will give you an honest answer because I have no reason to lie to you. So their questions were very like small and innocent. Like one question was, for example, why is a man allowed to have four wives? And one of my go-to answers was, it was more about that time, and because of times of war, the men would be killed, and then there's more women than men and whatnot. And some of these answers, I'm surprised that I came up with myself because these rationalizations, I wasn't not all of them I was taught from a website or a friend or whatever. It was just in my head. I'm like, well, it must be okay. So how is it okay? Right. And then that's how you arrive at that. Um, so yeah, it wasn't at all that someone was probing me or pushing the limits. If anything, it was just me in my own head afterwards. And at some point, I stopped saying it because as I was saying that, it sounded really ridiculous, right?
What was it? The category of morality and things about that. Science. It sounds like it was morality questions.
It was all over the place. It wasn't that like incessant or repeated or often. It was just here and there. It was just curiosity because people like that haven't. A lot of them haven't really met Muslims if they're from a smaller town in their North American country. Um, so it's just curiosity. Might as well just get it here rather than Google it. So it was just random questions like that.
Oh yeah. Were you part of at this point? Like, did you try talking to any other Muslims about what you thought? Were you asking your parents? Did you try to connect with anybody else, or did you feel like confident enough that you were right about your doubts and there wasn't any need to like look into it further? Did you look up online? Did you try reading Islam QA? Any of those things?
Um, Thankfully, I hadn't been completely aware of Islam. I don't know why I'm saying thankfully, but I hadn't been completely aware of Islam Q&A. Um, so I did ask a sheikh a few questions, um, and I didn't speak to my parents about them because I didn't think they were like big doubts or anything. I just thought, it's just a hurdle. If I didn't know an answer to a question, I would look it up online and just to be honest, I wasn't too concerned about the source as long as it sounded pro-Islam. Like I wasn't seeking out, okay, what scholar said what. It was just
Yeah.
find the first article that said why this was okay. And again, it wasn't maliciously. It was just how my mind was working at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's yeah, that's how I figured it out. And then at some point, I just thought to myself, well, stop poking at this stuff. Like just let it be, um, and just stop talking about religion and thinking about it that way. And that's how I put my doubts aside for a bit.
Mm. And so you put your doubts aside, and then you eventually came back to them, and eventually they. What was it like? Did you feel like you got overwhelmed by doubts, or did you feel like a sense of satisfaction and relief that now you had like, what was that emotional like experience?
Oh man, that was a journey. So. Um, Well, at first, when I had doubts and I was kind of quiet about them, I had experiences where it really made me think, is this too far? Like, are my doubts legitimate? Like, for example, one time I just opened the door for a guy holding a case of beer just to be nice. People are polite. I was being polite. And then in my own head, it was just self policing. Like, did you just do a haram thing? You facilitated him to have a drink, right? And then this is the kind of thing that Muslims sometimes do. They would go searching for a fatwa or go ask a sheikh about this very inconsequential thing. Is it haram or halal? So I asked my parents, and they were like, yeah, that's not good. Don't do that again. But then I thought about it. I'm like, okay, so I'm face to face with this guy, and I'm just like, screw you. I'm not going to open the door for you because I shouldn't be drinking alcohol. Like it just. So I just started slowly and slowly doing like things outside of my comfort zone that were slightly haram, but not immoral in any way. Like, for example, having female friends in a very platonic way. It's not really the most halal thing, especially if you're just with one friend or two friends and there's not enough mahram around. So um, eventually I got to a point where I was living a bit of a double life where I I stopped practicing because of that, because I felt like a munafiq, like a hypocrite. And we know what God says about hypocrites. It's very, very bad. It's maybe even worse than Muslims who don't pray,
Yeah.
or
Oh,
depend.
definitely worse. Muslims that don't play the worst of the hellfire, the worst than disbelievers.
Yeah. And I know the context might be, oh, like those who conspire, munafiqeen who conspire, whatever it may be. It's just I didn't want to be a munafiq. And
Yeah.
again, I thought God is not going to judge me for this. He's not going to like put me in hell for this.
Yeah.
But eventually the double life really started to like take a toll on me, because I had to keep up appearances with even like random Muslims around me. I had to be careful about what I said, not even about religion, about what I'm doing this weekend, about what I think about a certain topic, just because I had the feeling that they're judging me, and they did, like when something came out. So yeah, at some point that's when I really lost touch with my faith and I just put it all aside. But eventually that double life really started to take a toll on me.
So that whole thing about the munafiq, it's not just like those conspiring against Islam. Like we're taught as Muslims that anyone can be a munafiq. Like even Omar was constantly asking Muhammad, "Am I a munafiq?" Oh, sorry, not asking Muhammad. He was asking the Sahabi that had the list of the munafiq. Like apparently, there's a list that Muhammad wrote down. These are the munafiq. This
I wonder
guy.
why Omar was paranoid about it. I really
What?
think he was. Like when you look at some of the hadiths, like it's very obvious that this guy was just like he was pushing Muhammad around at certain times, like calling his wives certain things, or so I'm very very aware. Like you see things like that, we can laugh about it and we can see it from that point of view. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just found it very funny that now I could think of, oh, he was a munafiq. Yeah, that's not haram to think. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I find it funny how people keep calling me munafiq, and I'm like, get it right. I'm Murtad. I'm not munafiq. How am I? Like, I'm not even pretending to be Muslim.
Yeah.
I think
You
they're
just
saying they're like
yeah.
backdating my munafiq status to when I was Muslim. I think that's what they're trying to do.
Like at least use the right derogatory term, like
They're saying you were munafiq when you were
yeah.
Muslim, and now you're not Muslim anymore
Yeah,
because you can't.
sometimes I lose track of these conspiracies that they think are plausible, like that you for some reason would be a Muslim and like a munafiq. Anyway, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Like as Dolly is saying that's really exhausting to have a double life, and that's kind of the problem of you know being of this double life is created by Islam in the first place. And that's the irony here. The irony is that Islam creates the very problem that it complains about. Nobody would need to be a munafiq if it wasn't for the fact that, we are so, like, Islam is so totalitarian in our lives and it's so overwhelming and everything has to be centered around Islam. So if you're not totally on in line with all that, you're a munafiq. But that whole problem is, excuse me, created by Islam, because if it wasn't for the fact that Islam was like that, nobody would even care. Like, for example, when I left Islam, I was immediately, like my friend Abdullah Gondal or many of my friends, so many of my friends, the relationship with the wife is already under, it's in a dilemma, it's in a problematic state now, because if you're not Muslim, then she has to divorce you. So what do? You pretend you're Muslim, or you tell her and she's crying and you break up, or like there's all sorts of problems that are created by the fact that she can't be with a non-Muslim. And if it wasn't for that rule in the first place, then there'd be no problem. There'd be no problem. It wouldn't be a problem with me just not believing, because I don't have to believe, because it doesn't matter, right? But of course, if you're non-Muslim, and you're a child, you do not inherit from your father because you're a disbeliever, and there's all sorts of things. You're divorced from your wife, so it creates, like, don't you agree? It creates this very problem.
Oh yeah, it's a really good point that you brought up, and I want to add to it that it goes deeper than that. It's not just that, because of your situation in life and whatnot. In Islam itself, it is shameful to be boastful about a sin, right? Or to not try to hide it. Like if you did a sin, hide it and try to repent and whatnot. Or if you're going to keep doing it, at least don't do it in public, because then other people might, like you might spread corruption or whatever it may be, like moral corruption in your community. And that forces you to be shameful about the most simple, small things that are not okay with Islam. And on top of that, like your community, like you're saying, um, in some situations you can't answer the wrong answer, because you're going to face a lot of consequences, even if you're not at a position where you're married or you have commitments or anything. It's just like, what do you say to a sheikh? Like, no, I don't believe this. He's gonna sit you down for an hour and a half and keep throwing stuff at you, and it may get worse if you at the end be like, no, I just don't. So anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right. This is, munafiqeen are created in this sense by Islam, like closeted ex-Muslims, I suppose, or even those who haven't really thought about it. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So the Munafiq thing aside, so you would say it was was it tough emotionally to eventually, or was it like leaving? How did you describe the state of like finally leaving Islam? How did you?
Well, haven't even got to that part. It's a bit of this, a bit of that. So it wasn't that long ago that I thought to myself, okay, I am starting to make moves in my life that are permanent and independent of my family, and I see them as the right thing to do. And though they're not, again, not really morally questionable at all, they're not allowed in Islam. And because I don't want to hurt people in my life by pretending to be someone I'm not, and then suddenly having that rug pulled from underneath them, um, I had to be honest with myself and with other people. I thought, let me sit down and figure out what this whole doubt thing is about. Because at this point, I was just, I wasn't really a practicing Muslim at all, but at least I can tell myself, like, you don't disbelieve in Allah. You're going to be okay in the day of judgment. So then I sat down and I really, really looked into it. I started off again, like going to all of my sources. That's the point I was going to go back to. All of the sources of information I was getting from are very trusted Muslim sources. I made sure to avoid like weak hadiths or even Wiki Islam. I am not sure about that website as of right now, but because of my growing up thinking, oh, that's like an anti-Islam fake website.
Yeah, Wiki Islam is an ex-Muslims of North America project, so it's
Mhm.
created by ex-Muslims.
I've only recently found that out, and part of me is still very reluctant, or at least I don't quote it when I'm talking about it, because it's very easy for someone to say, "Oh,
Oh, it's
well,
Wiki.
Wiki Islam." Yeah,
Yeah, the thing that's ridiculous about that is that honestly they're making a genetic fallacy. They're saying because it's on Wiki Islam, it's wrong,
right.
which is a logical fallacy because I mean that doesn't make any sense. It they could say this claim is incorrect because it's incorrect, not because it's on Wiki Islam. I think what they mean by that is Wiki Islam is an unreliable source of whatever statements or like points, arguments. But what I've seen about Wiki Islam is that all of the points are well referenced back to the Quran and Sunnah or whatever they're quoting. I do think it's an excellent resource and it's going to be one of ex-Muslims in North America's biggest investments going forward. So ex-Muslims in North America has now moved, just as an aside, more away from the having local meetups and stuff like that, more into the advocacy, research, and I guess polemics like battles. So you're gonna find that the Wiki Islam website is going to get better and better over time, but it is actually a good resource. But yeah, so you didn't use Wiki Islam, you used good Islamic sources, and how old were you at this time?
So that whole facing Islam, I was like in my mid-20s. Um, and yeah, about Wiki Islam, before we move on, I don't trust, I don't really doubt it from that point of view. I don't, I've seen some sources and they look pretty good. It's just at the time, I didn't want to put myself in an echo chamber, or if the possibility was that it's all fake, I didn't know enough to tell. Like I was aware of
Got
what
it.
a Sahih Hadith is, but I didn't really look into Sanad and all that stuff. So I just thought
Yeah.
to myself, better find this stuff organically. Like look at what
Can I
you
say one
think
more,
is wrong. Go ahead.
can I say one more thing just before you
Sure.
continue?
Yeah.
Just to say one more thing. That's excellent that you did that. That you looked back to the original sources for everything, which is, and you had the ability to do that, which is fantastic. What I was gonna say was that, um, oh my God, I forgot my point. Okay, just continue. If I remember, I'll get back to
Sure.
it. Sorry.
Sure. So yeah, that was the reason why I didn't want to go to a list or a compilation of problems in Islam. I simply, funny enough, I was looking for, okay, there's this problem. I go to find solutions or answers, explanations or apologetics, whatever you call them. And I would listen to sheikhs, and I would even, like, I tried to look for who's the most moderate, nice sheikh you can listen to. And the answers were so vague or unconvincing, or worse than that, they were sometimes disingenuous or insulting to your intelligence in a way. Like, can you really expect me to believe that? Or I always thought of it as like, if I go to a non-Muslim and tell them that, are they going to laugh at me, or are they going to entertain this thought? And a lot of the times it's just they're going to laugh at you because, yeah. Um,
That's a good point, because what you're doing is effectively you're putting yourself outside of your cultural and religious conditioning. You're saying as someone that's never ever heard this before, and that's such a great point. Like when you start doubting Islam, a lot of the times it's like, okay, these are the doubts I have in Islam. Oh, the Quran has this mistake. But what you're doing is you're actually evaluating it from the perspective of a blank slate. Here's the Quran. Does this make sense? No, this is silly. Like all of this stuff doesn't make, not like, oh, let's assume it's true and then poke holes in it, which is typically what happens when people leave Islam, because you can't stop thinking that it is true, and the certainty that it's true is more than your doubt. So you start off from that perspective. But what you've done is you've actually flipped it to the proper burden of proof. You started at the point of, I don't know if this is true. If I look at it as a strange, like as a non-Muslim, like someone that's not a believer, what would they think? And of course, like you said, they would laugh at it because it's not convincing. That's basically what you're trying to say, right?
yeah, and actually, I was even more biased towards Islam. Like, I wanted it to be true, and if anything, what you're saying is how objectivity is. And I was trying to be objective, but I wasn't, because I was still like really trying to find the answer. Because nobody wants to believe or find out that their whole reality was a lie. So even then, like an answer that I would always get is like, "This is too complicated. You need to know more." And I'm like, okay, I'm here. I have the background for it. I'm not just some, non-Muslim asking about something I have no idea about. If you can't give me the answer, then how do you answer someone who wants to convert into Islam? And the answer was always like, oh, you got to work on your faith with all these rituals, like, prayer, dhikr all day and all this stuff, and it'll come to you. And I've had sheikhs tell me, sometimes the answer, you can't even write it down. And oh man, like the red flags were like everywhere. That's
Write it down. What do you mean?
like they said, sometimes the answer, you can't express it in words.
What does that mean?
That just means the answer isn't really an answer, it's just a distraction. Like you feel the spirituality of, yeah, this must be okay, and that's it. But I need an answer because, like you said, I'm a skeptic, I suppose, or I'm very like methodical about things.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. um,
I remembered my point. What I was going to say. What I was going to say was, some people will say Wiki Islam or any source against Islam, AbdullahSamir.com, is biased. And I know you're not saying this, but what you were doing was going to the primary sources, which is fantastic. But just for viewers who are listening, this argument is actually not a good argument, because what you're doing again is you're making a genetic fallacy. Everybody, every single person is biased. Muslims are, of course, biased too. So if you're reading Muslim sources, because you wanted to not, like, you weren't trying to leave Islam, you weren't trying to leave your faith, you wanted it to be true. So you were doing the most charitable way. You're saying, okay, let me look at what they themselves say, rather than enemies or opponents of the belief system. But in reality, for anyone that's looking at it today, I would say, well, just remember that both sides will have the biases. We have to always look at the arguments, not who's saying it.
No, you're absolutely right there. And again, thanks for clarifying my thoughts. I didn't mean to say that that's not a good way to go about it. And some people, like, I did it that way because I had the luxury to be able to do it that way. I speak Arabic, I understand it. I know how to read tafsirs, like directly from, the scholars who wrote them. So I had the time and the effort and the energy and the predisposition to want to do this because of my background. I wasn't looking for the cliff notes. I was looking for the actual, meaty stuff. And Yeah, but absolutely, like no one should be forced to justify their disbelief in that sense to the point that they have to write a research paper or a PhD, in Islamic studies to talk about it. So it's still very, very valid to like look at a problem, like a specific problem, see what scholarly sources say or what a Muslim article says and what an ex-Muslim says. And if you think the ex-Muslim is, talking nonsense, then look at what they said in their sources, because they always put the sources, or at least I hope that they do.
Mm.
So yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, definitely go through the chain of argument and see if the argument makes sense. Whether it's, I wouldn't even classify as ex-Muslim and Muslim. It's just articles against Islam and articles for Islam, because there's some good apologetics done by the Christian community. For example, David Wood, and there's a bunch of stuff that, even though ironically a lot of that would apply to Christianity, the same critical thinking, a lot of those points to me actually hit home. Like, for example, especially the Christian community tends to do an extremely good job pointing out the immoral actions of Muhammad, because of course they don't have that issue with Christianity. Now they do have issues with the Old Testament and some of the things in the Old Testament, but Christianity as a belief that the Old Testament, you don't have to implement the laws or whatever, they don't have that issue of the immoral, because Jesus didn't do anything immoral, basically, right? Whereas with Muhammad, there's like so many examples of things he did that like completely immoral. So it's just an easy thing for them to kind of focus on. The scientific miracles, the scientific problems in the Quran, again, it's a double-edged sword. If you're a Christian and you're pointing out scientific errors in the Quran, well, what's next is going to be your own book on the chopping block, right? So they don't tend to, focus on that. But yeah, even if they're not ex-Muslim, whoever it is, whoever's making the argument, look at the argument, like you said, look at the sources and go from there. One thing I thought was kind of funny is people can't use this, but you don't speak Arabic criticism. And
I don't
what do you
speak
think about this argument? What do you think about this? Oh, you don't speak Arabic. How can you know Islam's false?
Oh, okay. That argument I've heard the most, ironically, from people who don't speak Arabic. So it's the pot calling the kettle black. And I mean,
That's so true, actually.
it's puzzling to me. Like I take a second and I'm like, did you just really say that to someone? Like who's talking? But that's another thing that I want to talk about later in this podcast is, yes, they have a point, but it works against them too. Is you don't know the real words in Arabic. How can you have such confidence that your translation from, say, I don't know, can I name websites here, or is this like Yaqeen Institute, for example? The fact that you take this article and not like my or someone else's literal translation of the tafsir, that's just like, yeah. I'm out of words for that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think it's, unless you're criticizing the Arabic itself, then you need to know Arabic. But if you're just making an argument about the content of the religion, you don't need to know Arabic to know Muhammad killed all the boys of Banu Qurayza that were, had pubic hair. I need to know Arabic for that? Like, what is Arabic involved in? Like, there is a point in knowing the original meanings of the words, but it's not quite accessible for most people. And people convert to Islam without knowing Arabic. People read the Quran in English. Famous converts, Cat Stevens, read the Quran in English. Even unfortunately, one of the top guys in ISIS, John Georgalis, he was given the Quran by his mom. He read it in English, obviously, and then he converted to Islam. He didn't know Arabic. I mean, like most converts in America don't know Arabic, like Christian converts. They go to the mosque. Sometimes there's marriage of convenience, which is, you want to marry a Muslim woman, and you're like not Muslim, so you have to convert to Islam, and then you become Muslim. They don't know Arabic. Like nobody knows. Pretty much nobody knows. How many converts to Islam know Arabic? I'm wondering. Probably like a very, very small number, because what I've seen is that Arabic speakers, non-Muslims, are some of the most antagonistic against Islam than anyone else. Like Christian Arabs, like Christian Prince, they like despise Islam more than like white non-Muslims, right? And what is the reason for that? I think they understand it and they have access to a lot more literature where, non-Muslims are called donkeys openly, and like they see the sheikhs speaking, like, because you find, like, just like, for example, AJ Plus in English and Al Jazeera in Arabic, it's totally different,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like one is progressive, like lefty, liberal sort of, and the other one is like it's totally
I
different, right?
literally used to mistake their videos for BuzzFeed. Like that's how far, like this. Yeah. No, you make a really good point. Like that's
Yeah.
not at all to say that people who don't speak Arabic can't know Islam. Again, you take the trusted tafsirs and like you can understand English. Like the meaning is still there. I think that's a very bad cop out to say, the beauty of the Quran, you have to understand it in Arabic. Well, in that case, it's not really a miracle, is it? Like
No,
there's a lot of yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
like don't like how like what 5% of the population of the earth speaks Arabic? Like,
I don't remember the percentages, but I know more Muslims don't speak Arabic than ones that do. Um,
mm,
and again, it's a point against Islam that God should have released Islam or revealed Islam in many languages or something that everyone can understand. So yeah, again, suspiciously giving a monopoly to Arabs, or
yeah,
whoever that tribe was.
it would have helped, and it would have helped even more so because of the fact that ancient Arabic didn't have dots.
Yeah,
Like there's no vowels. Never mind the vowels. Fata kasra dama. There wasn't even the dots on the noon and the ta and the ya, like when they were writing it, and eventually they added it, of course, because they needed it. But the language choice is a very poor choice for the final revelation. And as we know, the Quran is primarily an oral recitation. And as we know, there are multiple variant readings of the Quran, and there are actually different words in some of the variants. The phrases are in different order, and some of the differences even ended up changing the fiqh or the
yeah,
ruling of Islam.
yeah.
By the way, I just want to say thank you, Truth Seeker, for joining the YouTube channel. Appreciate the support. Thank you so much. For example, there's one ayah in the Quran, one verse in the Quran that speaks about when you do the wudu, and based on the different variant readings, Shias believe that wiping versus now I don't know exact details, but like one of them accepts that you can wipe, the other one accepts that you have to actually wash the feet, I think, washing versus wiping or something like that. So the difference is significant enough that it changes the meaning of the verse, right? So
I
it's
know a better example than that. Like now that you mentioned that, there's differences between the word kill and fight. Like there's a word qatil and qatal, أو اقتلوا. There's like a difference of one letter that could mean either fight the disbelievers, that could be intellectually, physically, whatever, and kill them. There's a huge difference there. But that's not something I was aware of till like a year ago. Again, these things are not taught. I've seen a mushaf or like an old manuscript with no tashkil and no dots or anything. And I asked my mother about it as a child, and she was like, "Oh well, that's how they wrote," and they all knew what it meant. But then I had no idea how that branched out in so many mushafs and whatnot. Yeah,
you saw one without the dots. Where did you see this?
cannot recall like it was either on the internet or something, and it wasn't because I was looking for it.
Oh, it's online. I mean, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because right now there's none that exists right now with no dots in them.
Oh,
That was
not a recent copy, no.
yes, exactly. Not a recent copy because now it's been standardized, and there's a Cairo edition, and obviously it's all there's that issue now. And Muslims sometimes they don't realize that, like, one of the funniest comeback is, yeah, but the Quran's memorized by millions of people. But the Quran that you memorized is obviously the one that's already been corrupted, so to speak, as one of the variants. So it's like, how does that help? Because we know there's variant readings from the Sana manuscript. We know that there's other codexes that we found that have like big differences. So obviously, just before this whole thing happened with Uthman, there was a lot of change going on, and this change stabilized at some point. And what we have today is a stabilized edition, but there's still problems, right? Like the problems haven't gone away, So
No, that is something that is being more explored now with scholars, and like I'm not talking about Muslim scholars because they don't like to reveal that information as we've all heard recently. But I'm very happy that these things are coming to light because again, I as a Muslim had no clue. Like now I remember as I'm telling you these things. One time I was a kid and I picked up a mushaf in the masjid to read before I start prayer. Because again, I was enthusiastic. I was there early. I prayed the sunnah and I sat down, and I realized, oh, that looks a little different. It was a different cover color, and then inside the letters were different. I think I'm not too informed about this, but I think it was like Urdu speakers who were reading from it.
Oh, you're talking about the script. Yeah. The Urdu script. Yeah.
And I was told, oh, that's just they pronounce things differently. But again, for a second in my head, I was like, wait, are you allowed to write a Quran in a different way like that? But then it's not something that you think about. So
Yeah.
Muslims are
Yeah.
not aware.
I had a hard time with those Qurans as well because I learned it on my own in the Uthmani script or whatever. And the Pakistani sort of Urdu script was a little bit hard for me to read as well. But there's also Qurans that have like the variants, like the Warsh
Oh
and
yeah,
now
yeah. No,
those have even like bigger differences, right?
yeah,
Not
yeah, no, for
script,
sure.
yeah.
What was funny is I have a mushaf right next to me here, and I had picked up just out of curiosity an Arabic tafsir mushaf and an English tafsir mushaf and an English, just pure English mushaf. I haven't yet compared them too closely, but I found some funny things in like the beginning of it, like before the Quran starts. There's some notes from the issuing department of, this one's from Saudi Arabia, and then it says, oh, like it's been prepared by a group of scholars. Like, who is that? I don't know what that group is. It just says group of scholars, and it makes me really think, like, who's writing this stuff for us? Like, who's verifying it? But yeah, you're right. There is like the most popular one is the Cairo edition now, and you're right. That's why people memorize all the same one, because that's the one that exists today.
The edition, I think the edition you're talking about, the group, that's Sahih International, right?
I think so. Yeah.
That's the
It's
one that I was recommended to read. And the funny thing is, I don't know, I could be wrong about this, so don't quote me, but I remember hearing that one of the people on the team was a woman, and maybe that's why they didn't mention the name. I don't know if that's the reason why, but there's a bunch of people, including one like Muslim woman. Like somehow she managed to get on this team of working on the Quran, which never ever happens because all religious matters are always, controlled heavily by men. But yeah, Sahih International is the one I usually use nowadays. Not that it's important, but anyways.
yeah. Yeah. So that was I forgot where I was going with that, but
So
that's yeah.
so yeah,
Oh,
we're
and
going.
we were talking about sorry, the last thing we're talking about in my journey of like leaving Islam. The last phase was when I like faced everything right on, and I started to realize for the first time that, wait a second, can a billion plus people be wrong? Like that was the easiest retort always, like, oh, all these people can't be wrong. And I thought there are smarter people than me, which is true, who are religious. And then suddenly I started realizing, okay, I've been forcing myself, and belief is not really a choice. I can't believe this stuff. And then it just dawned on me that my reality just changed. Just all of a sudden, it was like it's a paradigm shift. Like life doesn't mean what we know it means. There's no afterlife. There's no fairness. There's no, and I was kind of headed towards nihilism, like a little bit. And then after I shook all that off, it was very cathartic. Like I feel like I have different motivations for doing things now. I have no fear of all the things that used to terrify me of Islam. And man, there's a lot of that stuff. I've gotten mostly over it, and not everybody does so quickly. Um, but the problems still lie with other areas, like how do I deal with my family, and then so on and so forth. But yeah, you're right that there is a very cathartic side to it, and it's relieving. It's like a load off my shoulders. My journey's not done yet, but it's one of the best parts so far.
So just to intercede, those of you who are joining right now, I'm speaking with Aladdin, which his name ironically means like upon the deen, or raising up the deen. Deen is religion, so raising up Islam. It's kind of funny name for an ex-Muslim. And for those of you who are joining now, this is episode 81 of the podcast, the Friendly Ex-Muslim Podcast. Do subscribe to the channel if you're new. As you may or may not know, all my new uploads are going to be on this channel. If you'd like to financially support the channel, please click on join or check out the Patreon. Thank you so much. All right, so back to your story. What happened next? What was the next thing that happened? You
Um,
left Islam now, so
yeah.
you finally found basically would you say you found peace, or was it like you did say that it was a bit of a struggle? It definitely it seems like it's a struggle for everyone. But like,
Um,
did you?
internally, yes, I found peace. Again, when it comes to me and God and Islam, all that stuff on my own, I've found peace in that sense. But then I've started to like peace can't really exist till I've figured things out about my double life with my family. So that's the part that I'm working on right now. It's been a gradual, introduction to my thought process rather than, hey, I think religion is fake, and then people really don't like hearing that. And again, the point is not to make them not believe, but at least explain to them that I've really, really tried. So that's where I'm stuck right now. And what else? Yeah, and then the other side of it was I feel like a bit of a responsibility now that I'm out to not necessarily to like pull out others out with me, because that's the narrative that Muslims say, that you're misleading them to hell, or like you're a munafiq taking them to hell, or whatever it may be. Um, there are a lot of people stuck, whether they're on the fence about it, whether they're ex-Muslim, whether they're Muslim, they're suffering because they think they're alone, and they think that they're the odd ones, or something is wrong with their brain. Like they're sinners, they're shaitan's whispers have gotten to them, all that stuff. And I feel a more responsibility to participate a little bit, if I can, to helping those people not feel that way. Like if they want to go back to being Muslim, and I have talked to people who went back to being Muslim, I say to them, like, always make sure that you're at peace with what you believe, and look into, don't listen to me, look into everything that you feel uneasy about, and make the best moral decisions for everyone around you, rather than because of an authority. Some people become better Muslims because of it, or Muslim and better people. Some people realize that they can't be Muslims. And then there's also like talking to people who can't figure out solutions. If I've already I've been in their footsteps, then might as well give them a shortcut. Like, this is how I dealt with this kind of existential pain, and so on. So yeah.
You know, talking about that, I have a friend that is Salafi, and he's an inquisitive mind. And we've been talking for a couple of years on WhatsApp. He found my post on my comment I left on Yasir Qadhi's page from years ago, and we became friends. And one of the decisions he made as a Muslim was, I'm going to buy a house for my family, a mortgage. He's going to get a mortgage.
Mhm.
And mortgage is absolutely haram. It's war with Allah. It's riba. It's cursed and whatever. And I asked him, I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Like, well, how did you come up with that conclusion, or why did you do that?" And he's like, "Well, my daughter, I'm having a daughter, and I need to have a house for, take care of her, because obviously we can't keep renting her whole lives. I want to have something left over in case I die, that she'll be able to, have, and all that." And he had his reasoning, but like, it just goes to show you that, like, it's not necessarily the case that everybody would leave Islam through your argumentation and your discussion, but maybe you just make them a little bit more skeptical so that they don't join ISIS. Maybe make them a little bit more skeptical so that they don't, like, like, I have a friend that was less religious than me, and I was shocked to meet him, and I found out he had like a big beard. He was wearing a thobe. This was in like outside of like Popeyes or something. And I like, "Hey, I remember you. We were in the masjid together in Itikaf. And what happened to you?" And he's like, I quit my job as a real estate agent. And I was like blown away. This guy was the best real estate agent ever. He was doing amazing. Like, he was doing a fantastic job. He was providing a service to the community. He was doing great. And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Oh, because it's haram to get a mortgage." I'm like, "Yeah, but you're not, like, you're selling the house for people. You're not getting." He's like, "Yeah, but I have to get the mortgages too." I'm like, "Oh my God." Because of that, he now teaches at an Islamic school or something. Like, it was such, like, I mean, it's his life at the end of the day, but it's such a stupid decision because it's so unnecessary if Allah is not real. And the more you double down and you invest in Islam, and sometimes, moderate Muslims, whatever you want to define moderate Muslims as, non-practicing Muslims, they don't understand what we practicing Muslims went through. because they were always like half-hearted about it. Like, yeah, I'm gonna get a mortgage. Yeah, I'm gonna date. Yeah, I'm gonna drink alcohol. Some of them don't drink. Usually they don't drink, but like they're
God
living their
forgive.
lives.
Yeah,
Hmm?
God forgives them, or that's like they want God to forgive them at some point, but it's not a big deal. Yeah,
They're
yeah,
not giving up anything for Islam,
yeah.
basically. Like a little bit, yes. But so that when someone like us leaves Islam, we're like so much better off now. But they're like, what's the point? Because they're not losing anything. They're not giving up anything, right?
You put it so well. Like, why do you have to insult God and denounce Him when you could just sin a little bit here and there and repent? Obviously, that's not what we're trying to do. Like, either sin or insult God, but that's a whole other thing. Um, yeah,
So yeah, so you're right. Like, by doing this work, and you feel a personal responsibility, I feel a personal responsibility as well, based on how I was promoting it before. And I do think that people are better off the less religious that they are. The less religious, the less Islamic the lives are, the less they spend on Hajj or whatever, Umrah, and the more they can have that money to spend on their family. I mean, get a mortgage if you want to get a mortgage. Work at a bank. Listen to music if you want to, right? Get a girlfriend. I mean, whatever. Live your life. It's just not the end of the world. I mean, so I do think that it's fantastic that we ran into each other for kind of weird reason, like strange way that we met. I don't know if you want to talk about that, or no? Should we just keep it aside?
yeah, sure. Did you want me to talk about it, or you
Yeah.
go ahead?
Well, you can frame it however you like. You can say whatever you like.
Okay, so yeah, I'm active on a certain ex-Muslim community, the ex-Muslim subreddit, and I had noticed that someone was trying to post information that they claimed was yours. And first thing I did was call that number, which I found to be okay. Am I participating in harassing this person? No, no. I just want to let him know that, like, be careful, because there was an address there too, and
Mhm.
I take this stuff very seriously. I don't want anyone to get hurt, Muslim or ex-Muslim, so or non-Muslim. So I couldn't reach you that way. So I sent you an email, and yeah, you quickly responded that that's not your information. Um, and yeah, that post was taken down very, very quickly. But still, I wanted to let you know that. And yeah, and then we got to talking, and that was only a couple of days ago, and then here I am. It's a
Yeah,
very surreal experience, to be honest. Like, I wasn't expecting this at all. Yeah.
no, you're doing an amazing job, and you're speaking so well. And thank you for keeping my personal information safe, even though it wasn't mine. But obviously, like posting people's personal information, known as doxing, is against the Reddit rules, anyways. And whether on any forum, like any ex-Muslim or Muslim, Islam or whatever, any forum at all that people are posting other people's personal information, it will get taken down. But in this case, I do appreciate the personal touch that you contacted me and helped me to ensure that it's not. And frankly speaking, I didn't go to the police this time. I was thinking about it. I don't know, I might still do it, just to keep a log of like the fact that people are harassing me and like threatening to release my personal information, even if they got it wrong. They were trying to do so. They're trying to harm me and my family, and that's not cool at all. But enough about me. Back to you. One of the things we wanted to talk about was, we talked about, well, one of them was being a cultural Muslim, and we talked about that, and how even moderate Islam represents a cult. You want to just, like, what
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on like moderate? What do you mean by moderate Islam, first of all?
So yeah, we have to define a lot of things, and to explain that. First of all, it sounds very repulsive to say that moderate Islam is a cult. And I know a lot of people would listen to that and think, "Oh, he's exaggerating." It's like people who call everything a Nazi, you know. So that's not at all what I mean. I don't mean that your neighbor, lives in a communion with whatever. That's not what I mean. But going by um, any definition of a cult these days, like especially one that's very known as the bite model, it talks about what things qualify as being a cult, what characteristics, what events happen. And by moderate Islam, I mean, like, someone who doesn't really look too hard into Islam, or prays regularly, or even misses some prayers. I'm talking about somewhere between cultural Muslims and like strict Muslims. I'm just talking about your everyday average Muslim. And I found that this was one of the things that led me to leave Islam, is just coming across cult documentaries and then thinking to myself, wow, those people are like, wow, how come they think that guy is so great? And then I thought to myself, wait a second, that's very suspiciously similar to what I believe or used to or think I believe. And then I thought, no, it's different because what? Because appeal to authority, because it's Islam. And then, yeah, so that's one of the things I started looking into it more recently, and I realized that's something that a lot of people who didn't live in a Muslim country really have no idea about, how it seeps into every single aspect of your life, not necessarily insidiously, sometimes yes, sometimes no, but it's just such a common thing. Like, for example, to go to khutbah and or just a regular prayer and read verses about chopping off the heads of non-believers and all that stuff. And it's so nonchalant because it's just part of a ritual that you do. Or believing certain things even though you don't believe them, or giving the leader certain amounts of respect and exceptions and all that. I just there was a post on the ex-Muslim subreddit showing how like it fits almost every single category. And if you go back to like original Islam as it was practiced by the Prophet, or as some people today think is like the extremist version of it, absolutely, like it's down to a T. Like it was beneficial to them. It was they were making money off of it. Yeah. So for a lot of reasons, I think that people don't realize how totalitarian Islam is. Like down to the idea of not being able to say, well, what this man did one time was bad. And I think that's dangerous, and people need to recognize that for themselves. The point of all what I'm doing here is not to show other people, look at what Muslims believe. It's actually more to show Muslims, look at what you are like, look at it from the outside. And also a part of it is to like make people who defend Islam without knowing it realize like there is more to it than you think. Like just because you know a good Muslim, you don't know Islam. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on that in a nutshell.
So I do agree that there's different levels of like, to more or less an extent, there are people that are in a cult in Islam. So I think I was in a cult. I think some of my family members, like the ones I was talking about that don't care about anything about Islam, like they're just like, whatever, I get a mortgage, whatever, listen to music, whatever, I'm dating, like everything that, there's nothing basically Islamic about them except they have a Muslim name and they believe in Islam, like sort of like, I mean, they, if you ask them, they believe in Islam, they ascribe themselves, but like they're not insulated from the real world. They work at a regular job and they're like just normal people that just care about Islam to some extent. They're not in a cult. People like me, though, I think I was in a cult because I was in a community, a very close community, mostly Salafis, not all Salafis, but like mostly in the Salafi community. And when I left Islam, I lost all my friends. Like all my friends, none of them are my friends anymore because they just all abandoned me. Because I mean, like minus one guy I talked to basically. And the people that were my friends, I can no longer trust them not to harm me. So I don't tell them where I work because somebody, I don't know who, called up my office and threatened to, not threatened, they called up my office and they tried to get me fired. And I think it's someone that knows me closely. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know who it is, but like somebody did this from the community that knows me because they had inside information that wasn't public and they were able to piece together like a bigger story about where I worked, who my boss was and everything at the time. It's a couple of years ago. So based on that, I just, that cult thing comes back that, why would you try to get me fired from my job because I'm speaking about your religion? So you are acting like a cult, exactly like a cult. And, so I think to some, to more or less of an extent, we can categorize certain Muslims as being like in a cult, right? Like, especially if they're being isolated, not allowed to read or interact with others. Thankfully, in my case, I was still living in a, I had exposure to atheists at my office. I was still reading whatever I wanted to on the internet, and so I was, less from that aspect. But eventually, I was able to free myself, thankfully. But I do agree with you that, yeah, based on the BITE model, definitely we can say that Islam does represent a cult in pretty much every behavioral control, informational control. What does the T stand for again? And T and E. There's emotional and
control.
thought control. Yes,
Um,
exactly. So you're not allowed to think bad thoughts about Allah. Even if you think like you can't think that Muhammad was a bad person because you're sinful, right? You're stuck for Allah. You can't. The Hadith says that if you start wondering where did Allah come from, you're supposed to say, "I seek refuge in Allah from Shaitan," nothing like that.
yeah. Well, I do have something to say about that, to clarify my position on this. First of all, I don't say this to demonize the members of a cult, because um, I was one, and it's like, if you can call it that, if you can classify it that, but it's not really an active choice because of indoctrination and just how you're raised. And I'm not definitely calling every modern Muslim a cultist. And here's where I use two words. I don't know if this is the official definition, but there's a cult member and then there's a cultist. A cult member could be very unwittingly in a cult, without even realizing it. A cultist is more enthusiastic about this stuff, and they're very strict about the rules of the cult. Um, the gray area is what I'm trying to highlight. Um, it's alarming enough to realize that as a moderate Muslim, you still fall under some some types of control of that cult. Even if you're not in a full-fledged cult and you have some freedom, it's very important to notice these things, like the built-in mechanisms in Islam. I'm not talking about people excommunicating you and all, and the death threats and all that. That is part of it on the more extreme side. But even built into Islam, like you said, like self policing about your doubts. That you have to praise the Prophet after saying his name every time, but not God, or at least it's not as big of a deal because God won't, I don't know, do
It's
whatever.
not a requirement, but apparently, if you don't say his name after this hadith that say your dua will not go to Allah, it'll get stuck in between of the
Yeah,
heavens or whatever.
yeah, there's gonna be some, I don't know, some drop packets on the way up there. Uh, but yeah, it's very just these ridiculous things. And again, you mentioned people who are Muslims but don't really practice or care. But if they're pushed to make a moral decision or to think about something in Islam, more often than not, they very easily fall in line with the cult rules. And that's the problematic part. I don't think they're actively harmful. I just want them to realize, you got to think for yourself. This is not normal. This is not healthy. And I personally suffered from a lot of this stuff, not because of my community per se or because of my family. It was all self-inflicted, and not because I misunderstood Islam. It's because I understood the Quran and the Hadith. So when something was told to me, like, angels are watching your every thought, that really messes up a child. Like, you have to think about, um, even though I thought I was a good child, I'm always thinking, well, does me thinking this one bad thing count? Like, is God going to count it? I'm so sorry, God, and so on. And that ties into another point, if you don't mind me rambling a little bit more about how, well, people who learned Islam as non-Arabic speakers, or learned it later in life, or learned Arabic later in life and understood the verses, they're not affected the same way by Islam. Um, so a very common trope among Muslims and criticizers of ex-Muslims and so on, and criticizers of whoever criticizes Islam, is, you're talking about personal trauma. You're talking about bad experience or bad interpretation. Um, I really detest that reasoning, because in some cases that is true, but who caused that if not the misunderstanding of the clear Islam, right? Like, the onus falls on the author, is the one who's supposed to clarify things. But that's not even the point I'm making here. It's that I was not exposed to, extremism. I had a loving family. They didn't push me onto any of this bad stuff. But understanding what Islam is from, from its own sources, from the Shaykh, from the Quran, that is how I got messed up in the head as a kid. When you understand that information as a child, it affects you very differently than someone who already thinks, oh yeah, well, Islam is real. Now let's find out some details. I used to know how someone would be tortured when I was a child, and I don't
Like
think
hell,
that's okay. Yeah.
the hell idea.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's not because, I mean, some schools and some circles of Quran and whatnot, they teach them about adab al-qabr, about torture in the grave and hell and all that specifically. I wasn't even pushed that far into it, though it is very common that a sheikh would talk about it in Jum'ah in a very moderate masjid, but it was more about me reading it being explained to me when I ask, and then it just sticks with me because I like this stuff. I like the Quran. I really wanted to know God better, and it's not the self-inflicted harm from thinking about this stuff is because I misunderstood or because I didn't think about it right. There is no other way to really think about it, like aside from how messed up it is. If you have a good sense of morality and empathy and humanity. So from that point, I really don't like it when I mention some of this trauma and Muslims say, "See, you have trauma. Your criticism is invalid." But my trauma was like from the mouth of God Himself. It's not from people because people make mistakes, but God doesn't.
Yeah, that is an issue, that the true and perfect and final religion of God is so has so many like contradictions and doubts and confusions, and it's not true. It's not the true Islam, and it's basically a no true Scotsman policy where anything you say that's about the Quran or the Hadith that's incorrect, they'll say that's not actually the true Quran that you're talking about, or the true interpretation, or you misunderstood it. If we have a little bit of time, I just want to talk about the trauma a little bit more, religious trauma of being a child that's exposed to such ideas. So normally, when we adults, like responsible parents, I have kids, I don't let my little kids like watch certain content because I don't want them to be like, harmed. They're not ready for like seeing certain scenes on a movie or something like that, right? Like, so we delay that. But when it comes to religion, they're basically getting exposed to all of these horrific like torture and cruelty and barbaric ideas. I mean, even like chopping off the hands and stuff. And all of this is coming from the parents are allowing it, right? Parents are teaching the kids these things, and they don't think of it as like a harm. But how did it affect you mentally? Like, did it scare you? Did you feel like you couldn't sleep, or like what? How did it? Because just tell us how you felt like about this
Sure.
as a kid.
Again, that's a very good point you bring up. That like I thought about how is it okay for me to a child to be exposed to all this horrific imagery that I'd like to give some examples here, but I'm scared that it's too horrific for this stream. But
Mhm.
the funny thing is, it's Quran. Like I'm just quoting the Quran, and that's not okay.
You can
Um,
quote it. I mean, the things that get me in trouble on YouTube tend to be when the bot can't understand, like if I made the if I quoted some of the things in the Quran, but instead of saying kuffar, I said Muslims, like
mhm.
the kuffar are the worst of creatures or something like that, and I used the word Muslim in that sentence. That could get me like kicked off YouTube because they don't understand that this is either sarcasm or satire, or even that this is a holy book.
Yeah.
So, but if it's like something to do with hell, we had a stream on hell, so you can feel
Oh
free
yeah,
to
yeah, I
mention.
remember watching that.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna give some minor examples, like the image of someone like burning in hell, and then their skin falls off or whatever, and then regrows, and then just the cycle of torture. It's so sadistic. And as a child, like I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies, or if there was a kiss on TV, I have to look away.
yeah.
But and again, like the example of a kiss on TV is to show that my parents weren't like the no movies, no music, and I wasn't misled by the bad morality. I to this day I feel uncomfortable looking at a kiss in a movie
Yeah.
because of that. Um, but yeah, so you're right. It is very. You didn't say this, but I think it's very irresponsible to expose children to that. That is part of the reason why I want to raise awareness so that there's no new victims of this kind of thinking. Um, and yeah, the way it affected me is one thing to note is I just thought of that as I was talking now is because I speak Arabic. This and I used to think in Arabic more than English. This whole realm of like the hell and heaven and all this stuff is more close to home for me. Like it doesn't go away when I finish Quran class and start talking in English and or Urdu or whatever it is. It's still the same, like I don't know, same dimension for me. So it sticks a lot more when I understand it in Arabic and it's in the language that I think in, right? So that kind of thing made it stick to me. And it's not like I was thinking about it 24/7, but every now and then I would have a random dream about like the days when I was like doubting in the beginning about free will and all that. Um, I was a good teenager still, but I would have dreams about the day of judgment and God saying to me, you're a good kid, but you're headed in the wrong direction. You're going to go to hell, but I'm going to give you 7 more days, or like go back to earth, and like, you get a second chance. And part of me would think to myself, well, based on what I know about dreams and God and all this stuff, maybe this is a sign from God. And then part of me is thinking, well, maybe these are just thoughts in your head, and that's how dreams work. And this whole like being pulled to two sides is really damaging. And again, I would have some dreams about the imagery of that kind of stuff. And even though I wasn't a bad person, just the idea that I may end up there, even, God says that not most people are going to hell. That is really damaging. Yeah.
You know, like Almin Nawawi, like took this to another level. He was like so scared of hell that, and he put two and two together. He's like, okay, well, children are innocent; they can't go to hell no matter what. Muslim children, and if I die
Oh no.
before I hit puberty, I will go to heaven. And hell is the most unimaginable thing. So why the fuck would I continue living? And he tried to kill himself. He jumped out of a window. I mean, it's perfectly logical what he did. He's trying to protect himself from this unimaginable torture, which is hell hereafter. And his logic is flawless. I mean, how can you fault him for that? Like, what did he? Where's the mistake in his logic? There is no mistake in his like. He found a get out of jail card.
Especially for a child, like you're not accountable for your actions as a child, and that's what we're taught in Islam. Like in front of God, I mean, you're going to be judged once you hit puberty because that's the magical switch. And yeah, no, that's very unfortunate and damaging, and like it's rational. It's not even irrational or an extremist like view of it. It's just it's a game of chance. Also, like, do I want to take my chances and maybe go to hell, or do I go to a guaranteed heaven?
Why exactly? That was his thinking. Why would I take a chance? There's
That
no logical reason to do
yeah,
so.
that's really similar to what
Guaranteed
like Muslims.
paradise.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying guaranteed paradise, but that's the
Yeah,
same thing that like extremists like that blow themselves up. That's the same logic.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's dangerous that that option is open. That way of thinking, even if Muslims don't condone it and so on. Um, but this reminds me of how like sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought. But an example of this whole child dying earlier is when I asked about why Al Khidr. Is it Al Khidr? Maybe I'm misremembering,
Yeah,
but
kill
yeah,
the child, right?
the
Yeah,
wise man, why he killed the child. And they told me, well, this way the child gets to go to heaven before anything bad happens on earth. And that was
yeah,
just,
yeah. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, that's a justification for what happened. And again, that opens up questions of like, why didn't he just exist in heaven to begin with? Like, why, why waste everybody's time? And
um, I have a video I made. I'll probably remake it because it's such a fun idea. That if Thanos was real, he would be more kind than Allah. Because if he eliminates half of the souls, right, he's actually saving them from hell. Because they will have died as martyrs. They will be killed by him unjustly, and they will basically not have to go to hell, right? I mean,
yeah,
according to the idea that someone that's killed unjustly is a martyr. Of course, being a non-Muslim, they probably have to
that
be
doesn't
questioned in
apply.
faith or
Yeah.
something like that. But
Yeah,
even like
you're right.
according
Even if
to
you
according
kill
to the
half the
belief of
Muslims, like,
Islam,
yeah,
sorry.
I was gonna say, even if you kill only like, if you just count half of the Muslims, that's better than the chances that Muslims are getting today.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And if you look at um, Allah, Allah is this. If he existed, he's this deity that's sending 80+% of his creation to hell. Like
yeah.
majority of the world is not Muslim. Majority of everyone that ever existed is not Muslim. Even among Muslims, there's all these people that are on the wrong path. There's Ahmadis, there's Shias, or Sunnis if you're Shia, and there's Bohras, and there's like so many sects, even among Sunnis, there's the Salafis. Some people say Wahhabis are not Muslim. Some people say Sufis are not Muslim. They're doing shirk. I mean, how many people are actually going to paradise? Like basically nobody. Like
No, yeah, absolutely. And women being more than men in paradise, that's a whole other thing.
in hell.
Yeah, sorry, in hell. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you count Hurulain as women, but that's something else. They would,
No,
yeah. No, yeah, yeah. It's really that was again one of the things that I thought about. I'm like, that's really sadistic and doesn't seem wise or fair. Um, and like, what kind of test is it if you know most of the subjects are going to fail? Maybe make better subjects. Like I don't know. But I was talking about how damn it, I lost my train of thought.
that's
Go
okay.
ahead.
Yeah, this is a very, I mean, this topic is very intense emotionally. So, how about before we end, I want to, um, oh, I just saw your comment. How about we end on something positive? Like, let's talk about how your life is now, because I mean, this is all like, really sad how, many young kids are suffering under this belief system, and we didn't even talk about like little girls having to wear hijab and anything like that. But let's talk about um, your life now. How's your life now after leaving Islam? Like, are you, you said you were battling with nihilism at some point. What happened? Like, how are things?
Um, on some fronts, like for example, my battle with nihilism, it still makes sense. Nihilism that nothing intrinsically has purpose or meaning or whatever. If um, it doesn't, but that's not a reason to not make meaning or purpose of things. Um, like just because God didn't tell us to live life a certain way and we're going to get a prize at the end, we can make our own like I don't know set of rules or no rules. Which is like my new philosophy on life is try to be a net positive in the world. Um, that's not to say that like I'm a saint or anything. I make mistakes, but try to contribute as much as you can. You don't have to be a philanthropist, but contribute in every way you can, like with a smile, with a whatever it may be, and just make sure that you're not hurting people around you. That's the important part. Not that you're not hurting some deity or you're working for a goal. And I found that to be a lot more helpful. Like I feel happier if I do a good deed because I know I'm not doing it for any selfish reason. Because this person's going to walk away and I'm never going to hear about them again. And that's okay. Like I don't need someone to count my good deeds for me. And I think that could make you a better person, or at least I think it's been making me a better person. It increases my reward from doing something nice, so just between me and myself. And from that end, I think it's really improved my quality of life. Um, on the other side, like I still have to deal with all the problems that a closeted ex-Muslim has to deal with. Um, and it's very varying in severity, of course. Like some people don't really care, and I don't need to bring it up in any conversation. And the biggest issue is, you get to a point in life where you can't hide certain things, like who you want to end up marrying, where you want to live, and so on. And that is where I'm facing issues trying to talk to my family about why I'm leaving Islam. Because in reality, you're not supposed to justify yourself. You're not it's not their right to make you justify yourself, but I'm trying to smoothen out the transition for them. So the problem comes from other people's acceptance of apostasy, and that's what I'm trying to work on for other people as well. um, so yeah, once that is like figured out, I think yeah, my life is a lot happier than before.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, there's definitely some uh in the in between phase. There's definitely some difficulties that ex-Muslims have to go through. Anyone that's coming out and has to kind of reveal themselves or plans to reveal themselves. I know some people that even today in the 40s never told their parents that they're ex-Muslim or they left Islam or they're atheist. So it doesn't have to be the case that you come out, but of course, living a double life is always, being authentic is always more satisfying, even though it comes with a cost. So it seems like you're on that path. You're planning to at some point come out. Is that correct?
Yeah, at least to a certain amount of people that it matters to me that they be involved in my life. Because if I'm living a double life, I'm robbing them of half of my life that they're not in. So
That's true.
it's not at all like some people think it's arrogance or because I want my freedom, or it's just that I want to do the best thing for everyone, and I think that is the best thing for everyone in that case. Um, yeah.
It's a very personal decision, and there's costs that everyone pays for it when they do this. For example, one of my friends, like I mentioned to you, he's in his 40s. One of the reasons he didn't come out as an ex-Muslim is he still wants to see his nephews and nieces,
Hmm.
and he knows, guaranteed, he will never see them again. Right? Like thankfully his kids and stuff, that's not an issue, and that will never, he'll see his kids for sure no matter what. But like some of his family members, his sister, his brother, they may not ever see him again, or he may never see them again, and that's, at least that's a fear in his mind. It doesn't always end up that way, but there's always a risk, and he just doesn't want to take that risk. For me personally, I could never do that. I just got to be open. That's just my personality. um and it's just the way I am. So yeah, whatever you decide, bro, I wish you well in that decision.
Thank you.
uh just want to read this comment. Thanks for sharing the perspective, story, and experiences. So proud of you for speaking up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely, it was a great conversation. I just want to deal with one comment here. Where is it? 1 second. So someone said that, where is, found it. There we go. There we go. Someone said, "Oh my God, it sounds like he's studying a new religion." So what I'm gonna say to that is, like, I'm what are your personal choices that you make and your personal life, it's yours to live. And if you want to call that your own religion, I don't know, that's not what a religion is. Religion is kind of like a shared belief system that you have with other people, and there's some dogma and there's some books, holy books, whatever. If making your own religion means I'm going to be happy because I wake up and I exercise for 15 minutes, I do yoga for 30 minutes, and then I go and eat a steak, or I go and you know sleep with my girlfriend, whatever it is, that's your life. I mean, that's not a religion. If you want to call that a religion, hell, that's a religion of me. And I'm happy to be the CEO or the prophet of my own religion, and I'm the master of my own life. Hell yeah. Like that's how it should be. Like
Yeah.
like wouldn't you rather be the prophet of your own religion rather than the slave of someone else's religion that like lived in the 7th century and telling you what to do and doesn't even understand half of the things that exist in the world today? Like hell yeah. Like my religion, if you ask me, is humanism. That's my religion. That's my religious belief. My dogma is that all human life is sacred, that everyone should be treated fairly, that everyone should be treated justly, no matter what your sex, gender, religion, or religious beliefs, or anything. That's my religion, and call it a religion if you want to. I'm calling people to be humanistic as well, but there's no apostasy punishment. There's no I don't get like 12.5% like my former religious leader Aga Khan got, or Muhammad gets 1/5 of khums. He gets 1/5 of all the world booty. There's no world booty. It's just a beautiful live whatever you however you want. I mean, don't you agree? That's how it should be.
No, I agree. Well, Muhammad used to take it for Allah and for himself, so not really for him, right? Um, but yeah, and the best thing about your religion here is that you can hold yourself accountable. You can hold the prophet accountable, and there's nothing sacred about your outlook on life, and it can change. Um, and that's the best part about not being in a constricted religion or one at all, is find the best thing for the current situation, not the best thing as dictated by someone.
Yeah, like the religious anchor of going back to Hadith and the Quran and Hadith is always going to um, make things difficult, because there's just some things that Muhammad didn't encounter, like in IVF, fertilization, like having a baby from someone else or outside of your womb, or like
Or
genetics. What?
airplanes or airplanes and
Praying on an airplane, yeah, going praying in space, even.
you know
But
what's funny that I thought of is like angels and wings. Like they didn't know that there was vacuum up in space. What were their wings for? Symbolic, I guess. But yeah, anyway, sorry. It's there's a lot of these little things that come to mind like every time Islam comes up.
yeah, yeah. And there was something you wanted to ask as well. You want to talk about
Yeah,
before the end?
it ties into what you were saying about, not everybody has to come out, and that is absolutely true. Like every situation is different, and I don't at all like tell people to go and argue with their family or Muslims or come out or any of that. But in that sense, I don't have a good grasp on this topic. So I'd like to ask you, in case you've heard anything from other Muslims, how do you um, how do you live within the bounds of a Muslim community or a Muslim country as an ex-Muslim, especially if your rights are being infringed, um, like a little bit more than you can tolerate? Do you have any advice for that, or other people looking to?
Yeah, I feel bad for people in the situation. My advice, and I spoke to atheists, two people from the Atheist Support Network who deal with this question a lot, and what are some of the advices they give to people. Basically, if you're in a Muslim country and you're, let's say, 18, or I don't know, like you're young and you still have your life ahead of you. It's more difficult if you're a woman and you're being kept away from school. But let's just say that you're allowed to study. Let's just say that you're allowed to continue living your life. My opinion is that you should continue to live as a Muslim and continue to build yourself, save money, build your skills, learn something that you can use, that if you ever have to leave, you'll be able to survive on your own, right? It's much easier to migrate to Canada. I don't know anything about immigration, but it's much easier from what these guys have told me and what I understand in general. If you are a skilled worker and you want to come in the country, rather than you're just applying for asylum or as a refugee because you're being oppressed as a religious minority, and that the religious oppression angle is a very difficult thing to, you have to prove it, you have to show, because everyone wants to come, right? But if you build yourself up so that you have some skills, then it'll be that much easier. And so, if you're studying, especially if you can study overseas, I mean, that's amazing. There's people like Zach Al Rayas, that he was in Germany. He's a Saudi guy in Germany, and in Germany he requested asylum, but he's already there, so that's different. But if you're not already in outside, if you're still in your country, work on building yourself up to be a valuable person, whether it's teaching English, whether it's creating, doing video editing, whether it's translating from your language, whether it's Arabic or whatever language you speak, to English and back and forth. All of these skills are so valuable and can be used to make money and survive. If ever you have to, let's say for example, a situation comes up that you can leave the country. Let's say for example, you're not studying overseas, but you're just studying in your own country, and then you go on a vacation. You get a chance to go on a vacation, and you can actually escape, and then you want to apply for asylum. It helps if you have some skills that can be used to actually survive, right? Like, try your best to get into the real world in whatever way you can. So that's the only real advice I have. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that based on what you know?
No, like I want to reiterate that don't make it your life's purpose to, fight for a cause, or leaving Islam, or to raise awareness or whatever it might be, or even within your own circles. If you can tolerate hearing the things that you disagree with, for your own safety, do that. Um, I know that sense of activism and sense of enthusiasm that some people feel once they learn all this information, and just curb that if you're in danger. And yeah,
That's a great
that's
point. Just to add to that, yeah, don't be a martyr. Don't make yourself a martyr. Don't try not to tell your parents that you left Islam unless you're comfortable that they're not going to kick you out or ruin your life, because you might have a lot of freedom in your life, and then you lose all that freedom. You might lose your cell phone, you might lose access to the internet, you might lose the ability to go out with your friends if they suspect that you're an ex-Muslim or you're an apostate or you're having doubts about Islam. It all depends on the circumstances, and everyone has a different relationship with their parents. Some people I know told their parents, and the parents sad, but that's it. They were just sad. It wasn't like they were gonna lock them up. Like some other people, they're gonna be locked up if they tell their parents these things. So be careful, right? Don't become a martyr for the cause. We don't need martyrs. We want you to be healthy, successful, and when you have the ability to talk about Islam, you talk about Islam. If you can use a pseudonym and there's enough safety that you're not going to get caught, then you can do that so you feel better. But avoid doing things that will get you in trouble. I mean, that's excellent. Yeah, that's good advice, I think.
one thing I'll just add to that is I don't know. I'm trying to help from the outside. If I am in a privileged position to help, And I think one of the goals that I'm sure you already have that goal, is to normalize apostasy and normalize talking about these things out in the open, including, having these discussions on TV and on the internet, where we just, well-meaning discussions where Muslims can explain, or knowledgeable Muslims can explain why the reasoning they're angry is, or why this is wrong. And in that sense, we can make people's parents more comfortable, people's family, or the next generations more comfortable with this, so that someone who wants to leave Islam, rightfully so, and wants to be vocal about it, should be able to do so in a couple of generations, hopefully. Um, yeah, and
Inshallah.
inshallah, inshallah, it won't happen if you don't say inshallah. Yeah.
It's only when you get caught not having not having the answer that you can use that excuse. I forgot to say inshallah.
For a month, yeah.
Yeah,
Take
I'm planning to come and install the internet at your house, but I forgot to say inshallah, so that's why it didn't happen.
Right. If only that excuse worked in the real world,
So, anything else you'd like to add before we end off? I mean, again, I just want to say thank you. This has been an amazing conversation,
Thank you.
and I really appreciate you coming out. Maybe one day you'll come back and you'll be able to show your face and be public, and that'd be awesome. But anything else you'd like to add just before we close?
Well, yeah, I just want to tell everybody out there to just, take care of yourself first before you care about Islam or being an ex-Muslim or any of that. That's the most important thing. Take care of the people around you, and yeah, and I want to thank you for your videos. I think your videos were one of the first videos that I came across, and closed right away, because I thought, what is this kafir saying? Several times, and every time I got to a point where he said something I didn't like, I was like, no, I'm not going to listen to that. But here I am today, after having looked into this stuff myself. And yeah, thank you for raising awareness for these things, and I'm very happy to have this chat with you.
Awesome. So, yeah. So just to conclude, then, I just want to say thank you once more, and thank you to everyone who joined us for this wonderful live stream. We had quite a good audience today, and those of you, again, just to remind you, this is a new channel, and do leave a thumbs up, subscribe, all that stuff, and leave your comments. Let us know what you thought. I'm assuming you don't want to leave any sort of like social media profiles.
Yeah, not at the moment, but I do want to tell people to, like, if you do want to speak to other people like you, and again, take it with a grain of salt, because some people out there might be, faking it. Some people might be well-intentioned, but they're not very knowledgeable. But if you want to be exposed to people in a similar situation, feel free to check out the communities on the internet anonymously, like the ex-Muslim subreddit. While nothing is perfect, it's a good resource to not feel alone. Yeah, that's the only thing I'm going to plug today.
Awesome. And I guess if anyone wants to leave a comment for Aladdin, it'll be he'll probably check the video, so you can feel free to leave your comments after as well. And those of you who are asking me about contacting me, my email is Abdullah, ABDULLAH .adam@gmail.com. You can email me if you want to come on the show. I'm always, we can have that conversation. And as well, one last plug for the channel. If you'd like to support me financially, and thank you to everyone who does already support me, I really do appreciate it. Please do consider joining the channel. Click join now below, or on Patreon. Joining on YouTube, of course, gives you some YouTube specific benefits. On Patreon, gives you Patreon specific benefits, but in general, it doesn't matter. And if you don't have money, don't worry about it. There's a good support. You don't need to pay if you cannot afford it or anything like that. It's totally opt-in. It's only if you want to help me to grow the channel, make more content, grow the team. I already have a team, people that help me to do subtitles, to set up put the timestamps and the bookmarks. So this video will be bookmarked. You'll be able to see all the chapters where we talk about different topics. So you can jump to a specific topic and hopefully make some clips out of it as well. So again, I am so ever grateful to you, Aladdin. I'm so glad we met. And to everyone else, thank you for joining. And we'll be in touch for the next live stream, maybe next week. And hopefully I will get my TikTok live streaming privileges back. It's gone now for a copyright strike for my own, it's my own content.
you should have 3 phones just in case,
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.